Whenever I build a shed, whether it's for myself or for somebody else, there are a number of questions I ask in order to design the right type of shed. What will it be used for? Is it going to be used for a small garden shed? Will it be a large poolside cabana, or is it going to be a large storage type shed? These are all questions that as you're planning it, you address one way or the other, but there's some key elements that you have to include the shed to make sure that it's suited for the purpose. This shed is going to be used mostly for garden tools. We have a large lawnmower that's going to go in there, so we need a double door. We don't want to have to use that double door for access, so there's going to be another side door to get at all the rest of the materials. The second aspect of it is how the shed looks like on the outside. Many times people want it to look like their own house or look a little bit more interesting than a standard box type shed. Here in New England, the shed that we're building is going to have the same features that the house does, the same colonial type of features. It's going to have little gable overhangs, it's going to have a little soffit overhangs, some detail around the windows and doors. For the outside of the shed, we have 3 different types of siding. The front is going to be lap siding, and the sides are going to be white cedar shingle siding. That's pretty typical in New England. You see that on a lot of houses. You put the lap siding on the front, usually because it's more expensive. You switch to white cedar shingling on the sides and on the rear. On the back of the shed, since it'll be facing the woods anyway, we're just going to put on some straight panels on the back, some LP Smart Side. There's also a third aspect, and that's taking into consideration the local building codes. There are all sorts of building codes across the country, so it's best to check with your specific building official in the area to see what aspects of designing a shed that you have to address to meet those codes. For storage, we're going to utilize the roof trusses, we're going to do some custom building of some shelving, and we're going to use some pre-made, pre-manufactured items as well. Our shed foundation is simple, 4-inch thick concrete blocks set on crushed stone. To locate the foundation, we're going to start by building the outside perimeter of the floor frame. We'll move that frame into position, locate exactly where we want the shed, square it up. Once we establish where to dig the holes, we move the frame out of the way and start digging. We'll fully explain how to build the floor system in the next chapter, but for now all we need are 2x8s cut to the length and width of the shed. You can get this length from your plan. Lay the perimeter joists out on the ground, then nail them together with 12D or 16D galvanized fasteners or sinkers. Once nailed together, use the box to position your shed exactly where you want it in relation to the house and the yard. Cross measure to roughly square the box, then place the concrete blocks in the corners to establish the places to remove the grass. Before I remove the box, I check for level from corner to corner. This gives me a rough idea of how deep to dig for each block. It's pretty obvious by looking, that's the highest part of the ground here, but we use the level of check to make sure that that's where we're going to start from. You don't want to start from the low part of the ground and try to work your way up, because you'll find yourself digging very far down. So we work from the highest spot and do our layout from the highest spot down to the lower spots. That way it's a lot easier to add block than it is to dig out earth. Set the floor joist box aside and start digging. I like to use a helper with the shovel to do most of the digging. We're just going down below the topsoil, and if the topsoil is only 4 or 5 inches, that's all we're going to go. The soil beneath the topsoil here is gravel, and water travels right through it very easily, so it doesn't retain water. If it retained water and it froze, then it expands quite a bit, but seeing that it's a lot of gravel, the water goes right through it. Now you can either put a bunch of block there and build it up from there, but I find it's a little easier to grade it. Just using stone. And it gives us a little play left and right, back and forth when we put the frame back on to position it right where it needs to go. If the bottom of the block is above grade, add enough crushed stone around the edge to prevent the block from shifting over time. Any size crushed stone will work to support the blocks as long as it's well draining. Here I'm using a 3/4 inch size. All right, now we're just going to get a rough level. Again, we're starting with this side on the right. That's the highest point. And just putting a straight edge from one to the next. First, let me level this up a little bit. Just put your weight, yeah, stomp on a little bit. You know, work around the perimeter from the highest block. Taking the time to ensure a level foundation saves the headache down the road trying to straighten things up. Measure that, and we're either going to add more stone or we drop that down and put a second one on there. So we just pull a little stone out, yeah, and put a second block there.
Right.
Perfect. Position the floor joist box on the blocks and square it to make any final adjustments you need. Let's not try to move the back blocks in place until we plywood it.
Right.
Then we can move it around, that way it'll stay.
Because the whole thing is going to shuffle.
Okay, that's good. You know what, that one we started with could go up. Remember to position the block faces flush with the floor perimeter. Perfect. The floor system consists of 2x8 pressure-treated lumber. Joists are 16 inches on center. The front and the back rim joists that carry the load are doubled up. We'll use 3/4 inch tongue and groove oriented strand board, or OSB, for the flooring. Now that the foundation is set, we're going to build the frame. We're going to put joist hangers on the frame to hold it together. We're going to square the frame up, and then we're going to put the subfloor down on top of it, nail it tight, and that'll hold the whole floor nice and square and straight. This is the underside of the subfloor, which is, it stays dry, but it's exposed to the ground. So while I have it, it only takes a couple of minutes just to throw some old stain on here. And if you don't have old stain, you can buy from the oops pile at the paint store. And it just helps preserve the bottom. It's just an extra little insurance policy. While we let the stain on the underside of the floor decking dry, we can assemble the floor framing. Just hold it up tight, Mac, all right?
Okie doke.
Even though we will use hangers on the floor joist to transfer the load to the rim, we through nail them first. While it may seem like overkill, it's actually the fastest and easiest way to position the joists while we install the hangers. To ensure that the load from the floor joist is properly transferred to the foundation blocks, we doubled up the front and back rim joists. This will prevent the floor joist from sagging over time. 2 nails at each joist location is sufficient. When securing the joist hangers, make sure to use galvanized nails. The copper and the pressure-treated lumber could corrode the fasteners. Square the floor framing prior to installing the OSB. The framing might have moved a little bit during assembly. Keep going. Oh, yep, that's good.
Yep.
Groove into the tongue.
Groovy.
Tongue into the groove. Apply a subfloor adhesive, which is rated for exterior use, to the top of the floor joist.
Why glue?
Why not?
Why go to that extra expense? That stuff's so pricey.
Makes the floor stiffer and stronger, right? Only when we are ready for the next sheet do we put glue on the outside edge. This way we avoid inadvertently stepping in or putting our hand in the glue, which instantly makes a big mess. Set it down gently. You don't want to slap it down on the glue. Just to show you the type of nail that we're using, or the differences in the nails, this is a smooth shank nail right here. This is a deformed nail. They're both the same length, but for subflooring I prefer to use a deformed nail. This one happens to be twisted. There's some that have little rings on them. They're called ring shank nail. The purpose is that they go in and they bite a lot harder so that they're less prone to pulling out, unlike a smooth shank nail. So on this joist, I kept the glue to the inside edge so that I could catch this sheet. When we're ready for the next sheet, I'll put the glue on the outside edge. Again, it's worth it during the construction process to take the time necessary to get everything as straight and aligned as possible.
Okay.
Out of the way, let's just put it up on the... This is where a lot of people miss the mark. They don't put the glue in the groove. And that's the weakest point, so that's where you want more strength. Increases the stiffness and the strength, I've read, by up to 30%. For that same reason, I stagger the butt end seams of the OSB. Use a scrap of 2x4 block and a hammer to tighten up the seams. Yep, keep going, keep going. If there's a small difference between the edge of the OSB floor and the outside of the frame, don't worry about it. It will be covered up by the wall plate. For this shed, we can build the gable end in one shot and lift it up. We framed the entire gable end from the bottom plate all the way up to the top of the roof pitch. We're going to put the sheathing on, we're going to put the trim on, we're going to put the window in, and then the siding, so it'll be 98% complete, then lift it up into place. Once it's in place, we really don't have to touch it after that. Since we have the outline of the roof already on the floor here, we're going to use it to find out the length of the gable end studs. And so we already snapped this early. We snapped the roof outline so we could establish the trusses and build those. Now we're going to use the same outline to find out the length and the location of our gable end wall studs. Now we know what we're going to have for the length of the studs and adding for the gable end, which you will see in a minute. To lay out the balloon frame gable end wall, I first marked the stud locations on the top plate that we drew on the deck when we built our trusses. I then draw a parallel line above the height of the roof peak and mark the same stud locations on it. And then 63 1/4.
Yep.
See, I'm going from this mark to this mark, but I only have to go in between up to the top of the roof. I connect the marks with a straight edge to represent the edge of the stud. I can then measure the distance between the plate and the long or short point of the stud as it intersects with the top plate. That's the bottom of the top plate, and I measure straight down to that red line, which is the top of the stud. I add this distance to the standard height of my wall studs. This gives me the exact height of each stud in the gable end wall. That's what's nice about having the layout right on the floor. Really very little measuring. While I'm at it, I lay the top plates down on the deck and mark the stud locations. This way, when I build the walls, I'll know where to locate the studs. For this wall, we opted for a window centered under the gable. I adjusted my stud locations to land on either side of the window. Before I move on, I mark the stud locations on the bottom plate as well. Okay. Let's just put all of these in place. The floor deck is a handy surface to build on, so we take full advantage of that. Each stud is secured to the bottom and top plates with 2 nails at each location. 75 inches. The rough opening header and sill consist of single 2x4s secured to the adjacent studs at the proper height. Cut it out! I use the floor to square the wall. All right, you all set?
I'm in the right place.
All right. First, I tack the bottom plate in place. 1/34 1/8. Then, cross-measure, and make adjustments until I am sure that the wall is square. Yeah, I can see it has to come to me too.
Yeah.
Yep. According to my eye. A little more. Go back.
A little
A little more. All right, right there. Then tack the top in place with a couple of 6-penny nails. Right down near the bottom. Good. All right. When installing the wall sheathing, I let it overhang the bottom of the wall framing by 7 3/4 inches. This allows the sheathing to extend below the floor framing.
Well,
That's what I'm looking at when I say perfect. The bottom is. I secure the sheathing with 8D nails. I mark out the window opening and use a circular saw to cut away the sheathing. Writing is up.
no more trick questions, please.
Once secured, I cut the sheathing flush with the top plates. Look at that. Almost like we knew what we were doing. I apply self-adhesive flashing tape over all of the seams between the wall sheathing panels. I'm going to take this a step further, and we're going to install the trim, the windows, and the finished siding on here. Then once that's done, we're going to lift it up into place and continue with the other walls. And nail down 2 2x4s on the flat as blocking for the eave trim. So I'm putting an extra layer of tape where I know the corner board will end and the siding begins, because I know the siding, all the nails on the last row of siding will go right along this tape, and the nails for the corner board will be right here too. So just putting this extra piece of tape helps ensure that the nails are all sealed up. After marking the location of the corner boards, apply stops to set the siding against. These stops will be removed later when we install the corner boards. For the gable end trim, we use a PVC product that is impervious to rot and can be left unpainted.
Ow.
The soffit goes flush to the 2x blocking. We hold the rake trim above the blocking 5/8 of an inch, so the top edge will be flush with the roof sheathing. Once the window opening is flashed and the window is installed, we can begin installing the sidewall shingles. I only have the 4-inch with me. Normally I'd use 6-inch. Such as happens on the job site as well, you use what you have. You hold on to that. So the purpose of this flashing is that if water gets in through the window somehow, into the roof opening, it runs down, hits this flashing, and comes out. Before installing the window, apply a bead of caulk along the sides and across the top of the rough opening. This will seal the back of the window flange. Yep. 42. Perfect, right there. If we went ahead and shingled this whole thing all the way down, sided it, lifted it up, then we'd have no way of nailing this section of sheathing into the rim of the floor system here. And this is just to keep the flashing from getting crunched and mutilated.
Below the siding, we install drip cap flashing over the water table. Like most flashing details, I like to tape the top edge with self-adhesive flashing.
Oops. I'm trying to hold this down
Yeah,
against
hold that. What I'm doing here is laying out the courses of shingles so that we can try to get them to come even with the bottom of the window and the top of the window. Just something that distinguishes a good job from a bad job.
With the story pole laid out, we transfer our marks to the wall for reference as we install our shingles. Notice we used a piece of 3/8 inch thick siding to space the shingles up off the cap flashing. This helps prevent the siding from wicking up any water that pools on the flashing.
Now these are just B-grade white cedar shingles. They have knots in them, but the knots are usually up above the exposure line. So they're cheaper than the ones that don't have knots. Right there, right?
That's perfect.
While you can hand nail shingles, it's well worth the expense to rent a compressor and pneumatic stapler. I recommend an 1.5 inch staple with a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch crown.
You have to stagger so that you're covering the seams, and you're supposed to stagger over 3 courses worth. And these shrink anyway. A lot of people try to get them really tight. They shrink, that's the look. They shrink and they turn gray. It's the other reason why you want to make sure to stagger the joist, because they do open up, sometimes up to a 1/4 I've seen.
Yeah.
And if you have a 1/4 inch
Oh, yeah.
gap over a 1/4 inch gap over a 1/4 inch gap, water's going to go right through.
At the bottom corner of the window, notch the shingles to protect this vulnerable spot from leaking.
Because over the next 2 courses, you'll end up with 3 seams right in a row, all the way through, which would be a good place for a leak.
At the rake, the shingles need to be cut to match the roof pitch. An easy way to do this is to fabricate a simple circular saw sled that matches the roof pitch. The shingles butt into 1x blocking that will eventually be covered with a piece of PVC trim.
Oh.
Yeah. Up. Right up. If it slips, I'm running.
No, it should be all right. It's tacked up from the bottom, so
All right, you got it?
I have it. You're just going to nail it, or you want to eyeball it close for a
We'll
level?
eyeball it once I get the nail in here.
Back to me a little. Back to me. Back to me. Right there is good. Very good. Yep. So that's close. We're not quite on our line at the bottom, and it gives us enough room to adjust.
That's what we want.
You need to go in the middle of the window.
Yeah, not too much. Just let me pull the nail. Yep.
After we've constructed the balloon-framed gable-end wall we discussed in episode 4, we're ready to move on to the more standard construction of the other 3 walls. These walls consist of 2x4 framing. There was 1 bottom plate, wall studs at 16 inches and 24 inches on center, and 2 top plates that carry the load of the roof. There's 1 load-bearing header over the double door, and 2 non-load-bearing headers over the other openings. For wall sheathing on the back wall, we are using a 3/8 inch thick product that has an enamel coating that doubles as our siding. For the other 2 walls, we're using a 7/16 sheathing product that incorporates a weather barrier which replaces the house wrap. To calculate the length of the wall studs, I take the overall height of the wall and subtract the thicknesses of the top and bottom plates. Instead of cutting each wall stud separately, I prefer to line them up on edge and gang cut them with my Bigfoot saw attachment. Once the studs and plates are cut, I use the flat surface of the shed floor to build the walls. I begin by marking the stud locations on both the top and bottom plate at the same time for efficiency and accuracy. Each end of the stud is secured to the plates with 2 through nails. Then we fasten the double top plate at each stud location, remembering to hold it back 3.5 inches to allow the top plate of the adjoining gable end wall to lap over and make a secure connection. Fasten the double top plate at each stud location. I tack the bottom plate to the floor using a small 6-penny nail to prevent the plate from moving while we square the wall.
141 1/8. Yep, that's square.
As we mentioned, we're using a combined sheathing and siding product for the back wall.
And overhang at 3.5.
At the end of the wall, we let the siding hang over 3.5 inches to cover the stud of the adjacent gable end wall. At the bottom of the wall, where the siding hangs over the floor framing, I measure up and mark the bottom plate location to ensure that every nail hits home. I use adhesive at the seams to secure and seal the panels where they lap.
Strengthening up the joint and trying to make it a little more waterproof.
Yep. I'm holding this up because this stuff, that's good where it is up there.
Okay.
Whoops.
Whoop. Okay.
Got it. Watch the nails.
Yep.
Somebody, and watch
There's
it.
only one.
Let's go up pretty quick. Come
Yep. I'm all set.
on. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna push it.
Yep.
All right, you got it?
I'll hold it.
Okay, now I'm gonna go around, push it in.
You are stronger than the Incredible Hulk. There you go. You're on it. Okay, go ahead.
Once lifted and in place, secure the wall to the floor at each stud location and also to the adjoining wall.
All right, now we just have to put a little tape to help seal the outside, put the corner board on, and we're done. God forbid we don't build this sturdy enough and the wind comes and blows it down.
For the front wall double door opening, we'll use a load-bearing header to support the weight of the roof trusses.
Center.
We decided on a 5-foot wide opening, so we'll make our header 5 feet wide plus 1.5 inches on either side to allow for the thickness of the jack studs. The header consists of 1/2-inch sheathing sandwiched between 2 2x4s on edge cut to length. To support the header, 2 jack studs or trimmer studs are cut to fit from the bottom of the header to the bottom plate. To make things easier, nail these to the king studs prior to wall assembly.
Stud it. 5 feet, right?
Yep.
Small blocks, or cripples, are placed above the header at the typical stud locations.
Well, you smell that? Somebody's cooking lobster on the grill. Smell that. Is that lobster shanty anywhere nearby here?
To avoid the need for load-bearing headers, the windows in the shed were sized to fit between studs 2 foot on center. All that's required are single header and sill studs above and below the window. With such a large door opening in this wall, it's impractical to sheathe the entire wall before we lift it. Instead, we square the wall and attach one sheet. We'll infill the rest of the sheathing after the wall is in place.
Sorry.
Doing everything.
I'm all thumbs.
That you want me to
But before we raise the wall, we trim the sheathing around the door and window locations. This is a handy trick. Use the circular saw as a dust blower to keep the dust out of your eyes when you lift the wall.
Pull it to us. Yep. Pull it. Keep going. Yep. Good. Now up. Got it. To me.
Dust off. To you. To you.
It could come in a touch.
While Mackin fills the sheathing on that wall, I jump ahead and frame the last wall. I frame the wall just like the others, but add a rough opening for a door that I purchased at the local home store.
Doing all that bouncy hammering.
The opening is centered in the wall and gets a non-bearing header, like the window in the adjacent wall. A good trick for hammering in tight spaces is to use the side or cheek of your hammerhead to start the nail. Another good hammer trick is to use the claw to countersink the nails at the door locations. The double top plate ties the end wall to the adjacent walls. Secure the top plate with nails located above each stud.
Okay.
Say when.
When are you going to push? Hold it. Good. Hold it right there. This time, hold it there.
Before applying the sheathing, square and brace the wall.
Keep holding it.
Okay.
All right.
Did you check it?
Perfect.
Here, we use a scrap tacked to the top plate to ensure the sheathing aligns. The last step is to remove the bottom plate and the door openings. This can be done with a hand saw, but it's much easier to use a reciprocating saw. The roof system for this shed consists of simple, site-made trusses held together with OSB gussets.
All right, now that we built all the walls, all right, now we're going to take a step back. Before we built the walls, I actually used a floor deck to lay out the roof. Instead of using regular rafters and a regular ridge, we built roof trusses. I used the floor deck to snap out the lines because it's a much easier method of snapping it out full-length pictures and then building the trusses right in place there on the floor deck. So front to back is 8 feet. So that's what this represents. From one side to the other, one wall to the other, we have 8 feet. From the outside edge of that wall framing to the outside edge of this, we have 8 feet. And this is the top of the wall. So on top of that, we put a roof truss. We're going to overhang the soffits 6 inches. Because if we made it 12 inches like the house, it wouldn't be in proportion with the shed. So we want to keep the same details, but shrink them down to have the right proportion. So we're making the overhang 6 inches. So 6 inches from the outside of the wall to the front of the overhang. So this wall is actually this wall right here. What we want to do is mark the center. It's an 8-foot wall plus 6 inches on both sides, gives you 9 feet overall. Half of that, which is the center of the roof, 4.5 feet. And then what I'm going to do is just make another mark up here, 4 or 5 feet away, doesn't really matter, the same distance, 4 feet, 6 inches. And then just draw a reference line. And this is the center of the building and the center of the roof. For the slope of the roof, or some people call it the pitch, we're going to use an 8 pitch here. And what that means, an 8 pitch or an 8 slope, means that for every foot I come in, I'm going to go 8 inches up. We know we're going 4.5 feet in to the center. And go up 8 inches, there's 1 foot. 16, there's 2 foot. 24, there's 3 foot. 32, there's 4 feet. And then the half foot equals 4 inches, which is right there. Okay, now we have our top measurement here. This is the top of the roof. And we want the other top of the roof to fall right on top of the cord there. Yep, just like that. Because all these marks we're making is to the outside of the roof. And then the other side. So now you can see the three pieces that we need to build the truss. We have the bottom cord, and then we have two top cords, one on this side and identical one on that side, that we have to cut out a 2x4 stock. What I need to do is get these two angles, this one down here and this one at the top, so that we can cut this top cord out. A couple of different ways to do that is we know this is an 8 pitch or an 8 slope. And on all of these speed squares, you see a bunch of numbers here. No matter what type you get, they're all laid out the same. I'll use this one because it's a little easier to read. So it's the same thing. We're looking along this edge right here of the top, and we're going to dial it up till we hit the 8, the inside 8, the outside 8, not the inside here. That's for hip or valley. We're going with the outside numbers. That would be it. Another way is using a sliding T-bevel. That way you don't even have to look at any numbers. And all you do is hold it up against the lines, move it until you get the correct angle, tighten it up, and there's the angle for the top. Okay, long point to long point, the outside edge of the rafter or the top cord of the truss. Much better. We're going to use a plywood gusset to nail the truss together. So I'm just going over at least a couple inches past the inside of the wall. Match the bottom edge here, mark the top, but I'm going to mark it down about 1/4 because I don't want it coming up above the top. Again, the same thing here, down about 1/4 of an inch. Draw that. Bring this line all the way up. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's just a connection system. So we'll cut that. Go about 8 inches, 8 to 10 inches on either side. Yep, that works. So we'll nail that together, put the two end ones on, and we have a truss. The only difference between a gable end truss and a regular truss is that the gable end trusses sit on the gable end wall on each end. And because they sit on the end wall, the sheathing goes up. We have this big gap with nothing to nail to. So we're going to put in little uprights in here so the sheathing can be nailed to it. All the trusses inside don't need that. Once the sheathing comes up, 1/2 inch OSB in this case, and we nail the whole thing together, that's what really ties it together and makes it strong.
On this shed, we are using two methods to build the gable end walls, for no other reason than to show you two methods I'm most likely to use. When you build your shed, you want to pick one method and use it on both gable ends. If you use a truss to make up the gable, you'll have to add blocking to fasten your wall sheathing. After I build the trusses, I set them aside until I'm ready for them. For this shed, we spaced the trusses 2 feet on center. We marked the layout directly on the top plate, then brought the trusses in.
Am I moving along the back wall and nailing these with you?
Oh, I think I can do this with you just staying down there.
Okay.
We will find out.
Do you want me to set a couple of nails in across the back?
You know what, just for now, go up on the ladder and hold this.
As we install the trusses, we use a long piece of 1x with the 2 foot on center layout marked on it. Then we nail it to the gable end and use it to hold and space each truss in place.
Right there. Good.
For now, we secure the trusses by toe-nailing them in place. Later, we'll add hurricane clips to satisfy our local code.
Yep, I'll wait for you to get in. Just put it in position. It's got to go down. Yep, up.
We keep the gable end truss flush with the framing to ensure the sheathing remains in plane.
All right. Okay, we got the roof trusses up. We just have to do some adjusting here and there, take some measurements, make sure they're nice and plumb. Then we're going to put the roof sheathing down.
To ensure that the roof sheathing splits on a truss, measure back from the rake trim to the center of the top core. Also, remember to stagger the seams as you did with the floor framing.
I can spin it around.
You want spinning around?
No, I can spin it around if I have to. Got it.
The roof sheathing we are using for this project has a tongue and groove system that keeps the edges aligned without the need for roof or H-clips.
How will those designers ever know how to brace the gable if we don't show them how to do it now? Nail this down to the floor once we get it in position.
Let's overkill it. It's got to go more.
Uh-huh. All right. Now we got to get serious here. Is that working?
It is. Oh, hold on. That looks sweet.
Unlike the floor, adhesive is not necessary for the roof sheathing.
You guys are making me nervous.
In building this shed, there was no one point in construction where we can stop and say, now let's do all the trim. However, in a video, we can do exactly that. There are three main areas of trim for this shed. There's the trim around the roof area, consisting of rake boards, fascias, and soffit. There's the trim around the doors and windows. And then there's the trim that abuts the siding, like corner boards and bottom bands or water tables. The rake trim is installed first. In fact, it's often installed before the roof sheathing goes on. From the surface of the gable wall, we blocked out 3 inches using 2 2x4s on flat as blocking.
For this trim, I'm using a PVC trim, which is a plastic board. It comes in a wide variety of shapes and sizes, some different profiles.
This is definitely easier to do on the ground, this thing. If you only have one guy doing it.
The soffit behind the rake boards is secured to our 2x4 blocking. You don't have to miter the top, but you will have to back cut one of the sides to get a tight fit. We applied our 1x6 rake boards directly to this blocking. Use a piece of the roof sheathing as a gauge to align the rake trim flush with the top of the sheathing. On a gable wall, the 2 rake boards meet at the top in a plumb cut miter. In this case, it's the plumb cut of an 8/12 pitch roof, which you can read off your speed square. To dress up the rake boards, we added a second decorative piece. We let the downhill ends of both boards run long for now. After the roof sheathing is installed, we can install the fascia.
Sounds good to me.
Cut the length of the fascia equal to the distance between the inside of the rake boards.
Yeah, I know.
Then, using your speed square, install it so the top edge is flush with the roof sheathing. With the front of the fascia as a guide, cut the rake boards flush to it. Then make a level cut across the rake boards flush with the bottom of the fascia. Cut the soffit to the same length as the fascia and secure it to the bottom cords of the trusses.
Started here.
I like to visually check that the soffit is tight against the back of the fascia before fastening it.
There you go. It only comes in about a ½ inch. Yep, you got it.
For this project, we're using one-piece molded corner boards cut to fit around the soffit at the top and flush with the bottom edge of the wall. While fitting the corner board to the soffit might look complicated, it's really only 3 cuts. A rake cut that matches the roof pitch, a plumb cut flush with the side of the building, and a level cut at the height of the soffit underside. To finish the trim at the corner requires 2 small blocks, a piece with a bevel cut on top for the soffit, and a small right-angle triangle for the rake trim. While it might look like Mac is using office whiteout to cover the nail heads and the PVC trim, it's actually exterior rated white touch-up paint.
Almost. It's
Since we are building our custom barn doors for this project, the trim around the front opening is installed flush with the framing.
good. Yep.
All right. Let's do the other one since you're here.
And let's make sure. That looks about right.
The windows and doors came with their own molding, so the only other trim pieces left for us to install are the 2 bands. One is the trim under the front door, or kick plate. Here, I really appreciate the durability of PVC trim. This is a vulnerable spot prone to damage and rot, but by using PVC, I'm sure I'll never have to replace it. The other trim band is at the bottom of our balloon frame gable end wall.
Oh, yeah. Yep,
Okay.
I'm good.
We intentionally left this off to allow us to attach the wall sheathing to the floor system.
So we're putting in a couple of different types of doors and windows here. For this door on this gable end, we used a regular contractor grade steel entry door. It'll get a lot of use, and it's an easy door to put in and out. It's a very inexpensive door, but it's still strong and sturdy. For the window, we bought the smallest window that they had in stock because we didn't want too much glass in the shed. We still want to use the inside of shed for mostly storage, so we want to limit the amount of glass that's around there. For the front, we're going to put in a nice wide double door. This is where we're going to save a little bit of money by building it ourselves and add some customization to the shed. You know, how about you getting this other end?
Okay. How am I going to get it?
Right there.
Oh.
You can't get that?
Oh, I thought you were going to do that.
Yeah, I am, but you do these first.
Before installing the door, I cover all the edges of the sheathing with flashing tape. For the window opening, I create a sill pan with one wider 6-inch piece of flashing across the bottom. I run this up the sides about 4 inches. Then I cut away any excess flashing along the sides and stretch the membrane down the front at the corners. For the door pan, I use the same method, being careful to seat the flashing into the corners. This helps to prevent the bottom of the door jamb from tearing into the flashing. Before installing the window, apply a bead of caulk along the sides and across the top of the rough opening. This will seal the back of the window flange. 2 people can work together to quickly install the windows and doors.
Beautiful. I love it.
For windows, the person on the inside can center the window and make adjustments by gently prying on the edges.
This side's got to go up. Up a little bit more.
That's it.
That's good.
The person on the outside can level and nail the window once it's in place. The same cooperation works for the door installation as well.
Good.
First, once the door is centered, the outside person tacks the molding at the bottom. Then, the inside person can adjust for an even gap between the door edge and the jamb.
All set. Go ahead. They look good.
When the door is in place, a nail anywhere along the top will hold it until the door can be permanently secured.
Nail it off.
Let me give it a shot. All right. Put one right in the center here. I'll hold it. 2.
Okay.
Yep. All set.
Okay.
Good. Nail it off.
You got it.
For the double front door, we'll use the same 2-in-1 siding and sheathing product that we used on the back of the shed. This will make light, sturdy doors that won't sag over time. On the outside, we'll apply a 1x4 pine frame. This adds stiffness to the sheathing and gives us something solid to fasten our hinges to. A rough opening is 5 feet wide, so one door is 2 1/2 feet. Then I subtract 1/4 of an inch all the way around to allow the door to move. So I mark and cut 2 pieces of the sheathing to 2 feet 5 1/2 inches by 6 feet 2 1/2 inches. Rather than measuring and cutting the doors separately, I tack 2 sheets of the door material together and cut them at the same time. $74.25. Again, for the 1x door framing, I stack the pieces and cut them 2 at a time. To temporarily hold the 1x, I tack it in place with finish nails until I permanently secure it from the back with 1-inch deck screws.
Quarter.
To get a solid connection, be sure to clamp or hold the 1x and the sheathing firmly together as you drive the screws. You can design your doors to your own taste. Here we went for a simple barn door look with no diagonals.
And not one screw came through. Good.
I like that.
You like that idea?
Yep.
Let's see what it's going to look like.
It's fine landscaping.
Oh, that's going to look beautiful, huh?
Our hinges were off-the-shelf barn-style hinges from the local home store. I attached the hinges directly to the 1x pine with 1 1/4 inch screws. To hang the door, simply hold it in place and secure the other side of the hinge leaves.
It's not
That's
bad.
squarer than I thought.
I like that.
Is that a word?
That's the one. Very much more square. Hit one in the
Send it
bottom
too
too, and
far
we'll call
home.
it good for now till we get the other one
Yeah.
on and check it.
Just right.
I'm using a typical slide bolt and some handles for hardware on the front.
Right.
For security, you can also add slide bolts to the inside top and bottom of the doors.
Okay, Matt. For the siding on this shed, we're using a number of different sidings. For the rear, we're using a paneled siding. It's a smart side, engineered wood panel. It looks kind of like a barn board. It comes pre-primed, so you don't have to worry about finishing it right away. Nice thing about this is it's quick and easy, and this is the finish. So once you nail it on there, you're done. For the front, we're going with a more traditional clapboard type of look. We're using fiber cement siding here, and the nice thing about this is it already has the finished color on it. So once we nail that up, we're done. We don't even have to finish paint it. For the gable ends, we're just using a white cedar shingle that we're going to let naturally go gray.
The easiest way to install the clapboard siding on the front of the shed is to make a story pole. On the story pole, I mark lines to represent the siding. If possible, I also adjust the course to land directly on the top of the window. I place the story pole so that the bottom of the first course hangs down beyond the sheathing by about 1/2 inch. I use the story pole to mark the top of each course of siding. Before installing the first row, add a kicker strip. This can be a ripped piece of siding, or, in this case, we used a 1/2 inch wide scrap of OSB sheathing. This strip kicks out the bottom courses to make it uniform with the other courses. An efficient method for installing lap siding is to tack in nails at the siding layout marks next to the trim. Use these nails to locate a piece of siding while fastening it. Once the siding course is secure, remove the nails above it and use them to secure the next course of siding. When marking and cutting siding around windows and door trim, leave a 1/16 to 1/8 inch gap for expansion and contraction. When the bottom of the course falls over a window or door, it's necessary to add a kicker strip. For these strips, I use pieces that are the same thickness as the siding. Cap flashings above the windows and doors will direct water out if it gets behind the siding. Cap flashing is sold at most home stores. For added protection against moisture infiltration, I tape the top of the flashing with self-adhesive flashing tape.
No,
Because you told me to do it, Rick.
yeah, 1/16.
Now. Whoops. Take the pewter beauty.
7. Screw it or nail up high.
Over the top of the last course of siding, I install a piece of 1x trim sized to leave the correct reveal.
Now that the front's done, we'll move to the side and finish off the last of the siding.
The process for siding a wall with the shingles once it's up is the same process that we used on the other gable wall before we stood it up. Only now it takes slightly longer to complete the job since we often have to work off ladders or scaffolding for the upper courses. The roofing material we chose for this shed is a typical architectural asphalt shingle purchased at a local home store. It matches the roofing on the house and is durable and practical for a small shed project. It also has the added benefit of being easy to install. Before installing any roofing, we need to install the roof flashing. For this project, we are installing a drip edge where the roof sheathing meets the fascia. On top of that, we apply a flashing tape.
And go straight
Yeah, straight as you can.
instead of crooked? Your hands don't slide on it good.
I've got a roller for that.
We also apply a flashing tape over all of the roofing seams.
I think it's clearly obvious to everybody that I've never used this before. It's my first time and will take a little practice.
Installing the asphalt shingles is probably the easiest part of building this shed, and by remembering a few rules, it will protect the shed for decades. First, install a starter strip of shingles under the first course at the bottom edge. And while I'm a fan of following the manufacturer's instructions, we used some extra shingles we had left over from a previous project as a starter strip. Asphalt shingles need to be staggered to prevent leaks. To stagger the shingles, cut a series of starter shingles and install them in a stair-step pattern. The manufacturer of this brand recommended cutting pieces of 28, 21, 14, and 7-inch shingles to make up the first shingles in the first 4 rows. The offcuts of these shingles make up the first shingle of the second 4 rows, and so on. Along the rake, we'll overhang the shingles 3/4 of an inch. This, combined with our PVC trim, will prevent any water damage along that edge.
No soup for you. You want bread? You pay for bread.
It's not hard to keep shingle rows aligned, especially on a small roof like this. But it's not a bad idea to snap a few control lines along the way. We overlay the top courses, then install the ridge cap to complete the roof.
To finish the roof, you use a roof cap, which in this case is just standard 3-tab shingles that I cut with a little angle on them. Now you can buy them like this, but I happen to have an extra bundle laying around of 3-tab shingles, so I cut them up and they fit on the exact same way as the pre-bought stuff. For this shed, we're using a pretty basic foundation system. All it is cinder blocks on top of some crushed stone that goes into the dirt 6 to 8 inches. We just dug the topsoil down until we hit some gravel, filled the holes up with crushed stone, and then put cinder blocks on top. But for a lot of other cases, you have to use a more substantial footing, either by code or just by common sense. If you live in a high wind area or a seismic zone and you want this shed to stay put, you have to do something a little bit more substantial than just plopping it on a bunch of cinder blocks. Okay, over here we have some different alternatives to the foundation systems. This one actually isn't that much more substantial. It's just a little bit easier. It's a heavier foundation, a heavier block than what I have there. You don't want to set it on top of the grass or the subsoil. You want to put on something more substantial like we did, like gravel or crushed stone. Once it's set, there's a hole formed into it that accepts a 4x4 post pretty tightly. And obviously this is a little bit easier to do as far as leveling, because you don't have to set these at all the same level like we did with the cinder block. These can go at a little bit different levels, and then you can cut the 4x4 to the exact level so your shed stays level. And then you have some sort of connector to connect the post to the floor system. Another alternative is called the ready footing. And this is plastic and consists of a base, a top, and in between is just a simple scheduled 44-inch pipe. You dig the footing down as far as you want it. Say you want to go below the frost line, and around here it's about 42 inches. I would dig down 42 inches, set the base down in the hole. You cut the Schedule 40 pipe, place this on top, push it tight together. You don't have to glue it, and it's all set. Backfill it, make sure it stays plumb, and there's your footing. The floor frame fits right inside the flanges here. And then there are a couple of bolts that bolt it and secure the frame to the ready footing. The nice thing about the ready footing is that you don't have to wait for the cement to cure. The minute you dig the hole, drop the footing in, put the top on, backfill it, you can build right on top of it right away. There's no curing time, no mixing time, none of that. So it's a good alternative to use for a solid footing when you don't want to wait for the concrete. This is what most people are familiar with, the builder's tubes. Basically, they're formed for concrete footings. Again, just like the ready footing, you can dig down as far as you want, whether it's a foot or 3 or 4 feet to get below the frost table if you have one. Drop this down inside, make sure it's in the right position. Have it sticking up maybe 2 or 3 inches above the finished grade. Backfill it, and then fill it with concrete. If finished grade came to here, we fill it with concrete right to the top. Before the concrete cures, drop in an anchor bolt so it's sticking up about 1 inch or 2. Once that's cured, we have the concrete foundation here with the anchor bolt sticking up about 1 inch or 2. Now to fasten the floor system to the footing, there are a lot of different types of systems to connect a floor system down to a footing like this. This is just one where it'll drop right onto the anchor bolt, and then you put a washer and nut down and tighten it nice and tight. Once the fastener is placed on the anchor bolt and fastened, and we can put a 4x4 post in there, secure that, build our floor frame on top of that. And again, there are all sorts of different fastening systems to attach post to beam, beam to floor connections. The whole idea is you want to have a system that connects your floor system to the post, the footing. Again, the concrete footing is the most substantial footing you can have for a shed, a deck, or any structure. So we've got the block on the rock footing. We got a more substantial large concrete footing that accepts a 4x4 post. We have a ready footing, and then we have the full concrete pier. Now, there are many different types of siding options you can put on the shed. On this shed we use 3 different types, which is not normal, but it worked out. It worked well for demonstration purposes and for practical reasons as well. On the rear of the shed, we used a structural sheathing type of panel, which also doubles as a siding. On the outside, it's made to look like the old board and batten or texture 111 look, and it comes pre-stained. So once you put it up, it's done. And then within a few days or so, you just have to paint it, and it's all set. For the side of the shed, we use regular B-grade white cedar shingles. They have knots on them a little bit more than halfway up, which makes them a little bit less expensive. But when you cover over like that, the knots are concealed. So the knots are really not a problem, and it's a less expensive choice than getting the A grade. Left natural, they last 20 to 30 years, maybe a little bit longer. A little bit more expensive alternative is a red cedar type of shingle. It's a little bit thicker, and it has a much longer lifespan. These typically go 40 years and over, again, depending on how they're treated and how they weather. Now, the red cedar are a little bit longer than the white cedar, and since they're more durable, we can actually get a taller exposure out of them. The other alternative to a natural white or natural red cedar is to stain the white cedar or red cedar ahead of time. These I ordered from the factory, and these are dipped so that they're covered on all edges, bottom, sides, front, and back. And you can see right where the line is for the dipping. This really increases the lifespan of any shingle, whether it's red cedar or white cedar. This one happens to have a semi-transparent type of stain. This is the same type of thing. This is a white cedar, pre-dipped white cedar from the factory. It just has more of a solid color stain. You can use just about any stain that you want on these. You can either order these from the factory, pre-dipped and dried, or you can set up a little assembly line in your backyard and pre-dip them yourself, let them dry, and then put them up. And they'll last a lot longer than if you put them up naturally. For the front of the shed, we used a lap siding that you typically see here in New England. A lot of the houses have the lap siding, but in this case we used a fiber cement lap siding. On the front, we ordered it pre-finished to the color that we wanted it, so once we nailed it up, put it in, it was done and finished, and we don't have to worry about protecting it for a long time. Unlike the beveled siding, it has a square profile, but once it goes up on the side, it looks just like the bevel siding. Another option is to use wood beveled siding, what the fiber cement is replicating. This is regular 1/2x6 wood bevel siding. It's a clear piece, so if you want the look of wood on the front of your shed, just like you might want to match the house if you have real wood look, this is a more expensive alternative to the fiber cement product, but again, for that real wood look, this is the only way to do it. And finally, we have another type of wood beveled siding. This is either redwood or red cedar, but this is a finger jointed siding. In other words, they make up long pieces out of very small 8, 12, 16-inch pieces of scrap that they finger joint, they glue together, then they run it through the mill. Once they do that, it goes through the painting process right in the factory, so it's primed all the way around, and it lasts quite a long time. If you're going to paint the shed, this is a good option because it's inexpensive and it's primed all the way around, so there's less labor. If you want a natural look, then you have to go back to using the wood siding and you have to clear coat it or stain it yourself.
We chose to add a ramp in front of the double door. This will allow a lawnmower or snowblower to be driven right into the shed. The ramp framing is made of 3 parts. There is the ledger that attaches to the shed under the door opening, there are the joists that carry the load of the decking, and there's a landing plate that stabilizes the ramp on the ground. The ramp framing is pressure-treated lumber, and the surface is synthetic decking which we had left over from another job. This can easily be purchased in small quantities from your local lumber yard or home store. First, I cut the joist to 3-foot lengths, which is how far I want the ramp to be. Then, I hold them in place and scribe the top and bottom angles. This is pretty forgiving, but it's important to cut all the joists the same. So first I cut one joist, then use that as the template to cut the other 3. Next, I cut the ledger to length, which is equal to the width of the opening. Then, I cut a bevel on top to match the slope of the ramp. Finally, I cut the landing plate to length, which is the same as the ledger. I assemble the ramp using galvanized 8D and 10D nails.
Now we leave that there and we take this, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Do I have to go get that crying towel? It's in my truck. Right to the end, right?
Yep. Not close to it. When attaching the frame to the shed, remember to position it so the decking will be flush with the floor. Then, I dig out to level the ground.
I don't know what that pencil was for.
That's a lot more than an inch there, bucko.
Gonna bucko you.
You will not. I know, we'll put stone in it.
Well, you are a little older than me, so I thought you might be more tired.
Right, let me just get... I'm on the mark, 1.5 inches.
Go ahead. You're just putting one in for now, and then I'll move this where it needs to be.
Right. You there?
Yep. Oh, and that helped pull it right down when you finish that.
We spaced the decking to allow a full course at the top and bottom.
Yeah.
To the mark I made here,
Yeah.
so that we can maintain
right.
it the same.
So measure that.
I've got 30 3/4.
30 3/4.
Then, fasten the decking with screws designed for synthetic decking. We also made a window plant box for this shed. Constructed from scraps of PVC trim, the box had 8-inch sides, holes in the bottom to allow drainage, and was secured to the shed with deck screws.
horsefly.
I was wondering when you were going to feel that. There you go. Let the glue do the work. All right, now that the shed is built, we want to organize the inside. Even though it's a small shed, there's a lot of room in here that you can utilize as storage area. In this case, I'm just putting a shelf from front to back on one gable end. On the other gable end, I'll do the same thing. In the middle, I'll leave it wide open so we can get all the items up into the attic area there. Shelves like this are usually pretty good for those items that you don't use but once or twice a year. Keep them up and out of the way. This corner, I'm going to put a custom potting shelf here, using some of the scrap that we had left over from building the shed. Over in that corner, I'm going to put a series of little corner shelves all the way up. Again, just to use the scrap and just put little nooks and crannies there, fill them up so that they can be used for storage. Just measuring up off the floor, snapping a line is good enough. You really don't need levels inside. Also, I'm going to be using some of these store-bought hanger systems that, just for a few dollars, really help organize all of the little implements all around that get in the way and start falling down. What impressed me about these hanging units is that the holes were spaced 16 on center, which means they fall right on my stud locations. So I don't have to put any extra blocking in or anything. So when your studs or shelves don't work out for 16 on center, you can just blocking it. Okay, well, I finished the shed. I put the roof on, the siding on, the trim, the doors, even the door hardware. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm finished. I think Danielle here from Fine Gardening has other ideas about that.
It's looking a little barren. I think we can do some nice deer-resistant, low-maintenance, really great plants to make this shed really finished off. But I'm gonna have to call in some reinforcements and send you to go build a flower box.
No problem. Hey, Matt, build a flower box.
So I've called in Steve for some reinforcements from Fine Gardening, and we kind of have to talk about what we're going to need for this shed as far as plant requirements, what they're going to need.
Well, the first thing we need to take into account is how much sun it gets. How much sun do we get here?
It's kind of a dappled shade, but mostly shade situation. We're getting some sun in the late afternoon, so definitely some shade plants.
Okay, the second thing we want to think about is what kind of soil do we have here?
We're pretty poor, well-drained, dry shade. So we're gonna need some plants also that are low maintenance because we're a ways away from the house and we don't have too much water available to water the plants on a regular basis.
We're also by the edge of the woods, so that means we probably have deer. And we're going to look for things that are not tops on the deer's list of preferred food. We know that deer will eat pretty much anything when they get hungry, but we want something that's not their favorite food.
So we're gonna head off to the nursery, pick out some plants, and we'll fill you guys in on what we chose once we get back.
We're just back from the nursery. We went to the Farmer's Daughter in South Kingston, Rhode Island, and came back with some great plants. Our first concern in plant consideration was addressing the corners of the shed. The corners are harsh angles and they're there all the time, so we want something that's going to soften them up and be there all year long. So we wanted an evergreen that was tall, about 5 feet, and about 3 feet wide. Any wider and it was going to block the path from the ramp to the door. Danielle, what'd you get?
We got some good stuff over here. We got this lovely false cypress, which will take the shade, which will take the low maintenance, which also has this lovely yellow variegation to it, which is going to be really, really nice up against our yellow siding of our shed. So
that looks great. It's going to get about 5 feet tall. We need something that's a little more medium height.
We got medium height too, Steve, don't worry. So here. Actually, I brought you two somethings for that.
Okay.
One is this lovely monk's hood, which is going to get some beautiful, beautiful flowers to it, which are going to be blue. And we're loving this blue and yellow theme because it really actually looks nice up against our siding, and again, a very low maintenance plant. And I don't think the deer like it.
The deer do not like it because all parts of this plant are poisonous. So you shouldn't eat it either, Danielle.
All right, well, I don't worry, I already had lunch. Here is also a fava gila, and we love this plant because it's very low maintenance. It's a dwarf variety, so it's not going to get that big and block our window, and it's got awesome fall color. When we get cooler temperatures, this is going to be a really, really nice burgundy color. So there's your middle ground.
Medium height, tall. What's missing?
Some lower plants, I know. Okay, I'm on it. So we got some really nice Japanese forest grass.
Looks
right
like
here.
we have two different kinds.
We do have two different kinds. This one right here is Benikazi, and this one right here is Aureola.
They look good, but we have some gaps. Can you fill my gaps here?
I got some gap fillers for you. All right. Here's what we got going on here. A really nice ajuga and another ajuga,
Looking good.
and some nice ferns. And these ferns are perfect for in the back.
This looks great. You have a variety of heights. We have a variety of bloom times. We have a variety of colors, variety of seasons of interest,
we're
variety
good.
of textures. What do you got for over here?
You're gonna make me carry more plants. All right, I got a couple of things for over there.
Okay, let's see them. They better be good.
All right, first for the corner, because I knew that you were gonna worry about this corner again.
I am worried about it.
Holy cow, this is heavy. Is this lovely false cypress. Nice blue false cypress.
Looks good. What else you got?
All right, hold on. We got some more Japanese forest grass.
Okay. Helps connect this side to that side.
We got a nice fern
Add a little mass back there. Good. And what's that last guy?
and a nice golden toad lily. Low maintenance, it likes the dry shade, and it actually gets a really, really nice kind of white flower that's got raspberry spots in the middle of it. It's perfect.
When do those come out?
Though it's going to be late fall. So again, we've got spring, summer, and fall. Really nice interest in this spot.
Looks good.
All right, so now all we have to do is make an edge, plant the plants.
Let's go find someone else to do that.
Yeah, Mac? Where's Mac?